They said she stopped fighting when the war ended. That Lieutenant Maya Brooks had left the battlefield years ago, trading the chaos of gunfire for the quiet of candlelight. But anyone who really knew her knew better. Because battles don't end when the last shot is fired. They live on. In the silence, in the memories, and in the names carved into stone. If you believe real heroes are never forgotten, hit that like button and subscribe. Because what happens next will stay with you forever. The wind cut through the graveyard as the sun dipped behind the hills, scattering long shadows across the rows of white headstones. The world here was still, the kind of silence that presses against your chest, heavy and unrelenting. Maya's boots crunched softly against the gravel path as she carried a small paper bag in her left hand. Inside, 3 candles, a folded photo, and a single white daisy she'd picked on the way. She stopped in front of a headstone she knew by heart, though she didn't need to read the inscription to feel its weight. Sergeant Elena Ruiz, 1995 to 2023. Bravery is not the absence of fear, but the will to face it. Maya sank down slowly, knees pressing into the damp grass. Her chest rose and fell as she drew in a shaky breath, pulling the candle from the back. Her hands trembled as she lit the wick, shielding the tiny flame from the cold breeze. "Hey, Ruiz," she whispered, forcing a small, broken smile. "Guess what? I actually remembered this year." She placed the candle carefully at the base of the gravestone, its flickering glow illuminating the etched name. Her throat tightened. 2 years. 2 years since the ambush. 2 years since Delta Team lost its brightest light. 2 years since Maya, the one who was supposed to lead them home, came back carrying memories instead of people. The weight of survivors' guilt never really faded. It lived beneath her ribs like a second heartbeat, a constant reminder of the promise she couldn't keep. She set the daisy down, brushed the dirt from her palms, and stared at the photo she'd brought. The two of them, shoulder to shoulder, grinning under desert sun, helmets tilted at a ridiculous angle after a long day of drills. Elena had that smile, the kind that made everyone believe everything would be okay, even when it wasn't. "I still hear you, you know," Maya whispered, her voice barely carried by the wind. In my head, yelling at me to double-check my flank, telling me to quit being stubborn, telling me we're going to make it out alive. God, Ruiz, I should have. Her voice cracked before she could finish. She pressed the heel of her hand against her eyes, forcing back the tears, but they came anyway, blurring the edges of the gravestone, the candle, the memory. For a long time, Maya just sat there, knees drawn up, arms around them, letting the quiet settle around her like a heavy blanket. The graveyard stretched endlessly, headstones glowing faintly under the dying light. Somewhere, a lone crow called out, its sound sharp and distant. The breeze carried the faint scent of pine and earth, and for a moment, she let herself believe she was alone with her friend. No soldiers, no missions, no orders, just them. Then, a sound broke through. BZZZT. Maya stiffened. The buzzing came again, faint but insistent. She glanced down at her phone, still sitting face down beside her knee. A part of her didn't want to look, not here, not now. But habit won. She flipped the phone over, and there it was. "Lieutenant, Delta Team deploy. Immediate." The words burned through her like shrapnel. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. The graves around her blurred into a sea of white. Her ears rang, and her heart thudded in her chest, so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. She read it again, as if somehow the message would change. It didn't. Same words, same weight, same ghosts clawing their way back to the surface. Delta Team. Her team. Elena's team. Her throat closed as memories flooded in. The heat, the shouting, the gunfire, the smoke curling up into a blackened sky. And then Elena, behind her, yelling something Maya would never remember. Then silence. Maya squeezed the phone until her knuckles turned white. She didn't notice her nails digging into her palm, didn't feel the cold anymore. All she could hear was her own ragged breathing and the whisper of Elena's voice in her head. She turned her gaze back to the gravestone, staring at the name carved into eternity. Her jaw clenched as if waiting for permission she knew would never come. "I can't," she whispered, voice breaking in the cold air. "I can't lead them again. Not Delta. Not after." But duty didn't wait for grief. Her commander's voice rang faintly in her memory. When the call comes, you answer. Always. Maya's shoulders shook as she ran her fingertips over Elena's name one last time, tracing the grooves like a map she'd memorized 1,000 times before. I don't know if I'm ready, she said softly, voice cracking on the last word. The candle flickered against the wind, fighting to stay alive. Its glow trembled, but it didn't die. Maya let out a long, uneven breath and slowly pushed herself to her feet. Her legs felt heavy, rooted in the soil, as if the earth itself wanted to hold her here, away from the world beyond the gate. But she couldn't stay. Not this time. She picked up her phone, staring at the message again, then at Elena's photo. Her grip tightened, and finally, she whispered the words she hadn't said since the day of the ambush. "Watch over me, Ruiz." As the wind carried her voice through the quiet rows of graves, Maya turned and walked slowly toward the gate. Each step echoed like the tick of a clock counting down to something she couldn't yet see, something waiting beyond this place of silence and candles. Behind her, the flame at Elena's grave steadied, standing tall against the wind. Maya stood frozen at the graveyard gate, her fingers tightening around the cold metal bars. The message still glowed on her phone, burning into her thoughts like a brand she couldn't erase. "Lieutenant, Delta Team deploy. Immediate." The words wouldn't stop ringing in her head. Each syllable felt heavier than the last, dragging her heart into the depths she'd spent 2 years trying to climb out of. For a moment, she wanted to pretend she hadn't seen it. She wanted to leave the phone there on the damp grass, walk back to Elena's gravestone, and stay. Stay where it was quiet. Stay where the dead didn't ask you to fight for them. But the silence was already gone. The wind rushed harder through the trees, rattling the thin branches, and somewhere deep inside, something unspoken stirred, the old instincts clawing their way back to the surface, refusing to let her breathe. She stared down at the message again, her chest rising and falling in shallow bursts. And before she could stop herself, she whispered, "Delta Team." 2 words, 2 ghosts. The sound of them cracked something open. Flashback, 2 years ago. Heat, smoke, chaos. Maya's boots pounded against the uneven desert ground, her rifle clenched tight, the roar of gunfire echoing off crumbling walls. The air was thick with sand and burning metal, each breath scraping her lungs raw. "Delta, move," she yelled into her comms, scanning rooftops for snipers, heart slamming in her chest. To her left, Sergeant Elena Ruiz darted between cover, her jaw set, eyes sharp. Always 3 steps ahead, always watching her 6. "Maya, right flank's hot." Elena's voice cut through the chaos, steady even under fire. Then came the blast. A thunderous explosion ripped through the street, throwing Maya against a shattered wall. Her ears rang. Dust filled her lungs. Her vision blurred, but through the haze, she saw Elena, dragging another soldier to safety, yelling something Maya couldn't hear. And then, silence. When the ringing faded, Elena was gone. Back to present, the graveyard. Maya sucked in a sharp breath, shaking the memory away. But no matter how many times she tried to bury that day, it always came back, raw, jagged, and unrelenting. She clenched the phone tighter, the cold glass slick against her palm. Her commander's voice, long ago, replayed in her head. "When the call comes, you answer." Always. But the commander wasn't the one who'd watched Elena fall. The commander wasn't the one who'd led them straight into an ambush. That was her. Maya's chest ached under the weight of it. She started walking, slow and aimless, weaving between rows of headstones. Each one whispered a story she'd never know, a name she'd never call out, a family who'd never stop grieving. But none of them asked her to lead another team into hell. She wanted to scream. At herself. At fate. At the war that never seemed to end, even when the guns went quiet. The phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a message. It was a call. She stared at the screen for a long moment before answering. "Maya." It was Colonel Harrington, the voice that had commanded her through countless missions, the voice she once would have followed without hesitation. But tonight, that voice felt heavier than ever. "Sir," she managed, her throat dry. "I know where you are," Harrington said quietly. "I know what today means. But listen to me, we don't have time. Intel just dropped. It's high risk, deep recon. We need Delta, and you're still Delta lead." Maya swallowed hard, staring at Elena's photo still clutched in her other hand. "Sir, you know what happened last time. There was a pause. Then his voice, low and steady. I do. And I also know no one leads them better than you. Her jaw tightened. She wanted to say no. She wanted to tell him she was done, that she wasn't the same soldier she used to be, that Elena's blood was already on her hands. But deep down, she knew what refusing meant. Delta would go in without her. Without her plans. Without her experience. Without her watching their backs the way Elena once watched hers. And that she couldn't live with. I need an answer, Lieutenant, Harrington pressed. Maya closed her eyes. The wind whipped through her hair, carrying the faint smell of pine and damp earth. She could almost hear Elena's laugh again, soft and mocking, the way she used to tease her before missions. Come on, Brooks. Don't overthink it. We've got this. Except this time, they didn't. Maya opened her eyes and whispered into the quiet. I'm in. The decision. The moment the words left her lips, something inside her shifted. Not relief. Not certainty. But something inevitable. Harrington's voice came sharp and clipped. Gear up. Wells up in 90. Coordinates incoming. The line went dead. Maya lowered the phone, staring at the blank screen. Around her, the graveyard stood frozen, untouched by the storm that had just swallowed her whole. She looked back at Elena's grave one last time, the candle still burning stubbornly against the wind. Her knees felt weak, but she walked toward it, crouching low, fingertips grazing the cold stone. I don't know if I can do this without you, she whispered, voice cracking as the words escaped. But if you're watching, give me strength. She unclipped her dog tags, worn smooth from years of sand and sweat, and laid them gently on the stone. Watch over me one more time. The flame wavered, then steadied, casting a soft glow across her tear-streaked face. Maya stood slowly, adjusting her jacket, squaring her shoulders. Whatever waited for her out there, she'd face it, not because she wanted to, but because she had to. Duty wasn't about being ready. It was about showing up, even when you're broken. Especially when you're broken. She turned toward the graveyard gate, boots crunching softly against the gravel, her silhouette swallowed by the fading light. Behind her, the candle flickered but refused to die, just like the memory of the friend she'd lost and the promise she was about to keep. The night had fallen heavy by the time Maya reached the base. The wind carried the smell of jet fuel, steel, and damp earth, a smell she hadn't tasted in her lungs in almost 2 years. Floodlights cut sharp, white beams through the darkness, painting shadows that stretched like ghosts across the tarmac. Every step she took toward the armory felt slower than the last, as if the ground itself was holding her back. Inside, rows of gear lined the walls, rifles, Kevlar, helmets, each piece humming with the memory of missions past. She paused in front of her locker. The name, Lieutenant M. Brooks, was stenciled in bold black letters, untouched since the day she walked away from Delta. Her fingers hovered over the handle, hesitant, like opening it would wake the ghosts inside. Finally, she pulled it open. Inside hung the uniform she'd sworn she'd never wear again. The patches still crisp, the fabric smelling faintly of sand and sweat, like the desert she'd left behind. For a long moment, she just stared at it, her reflection faint in the metal door, until her hand finally reached out and pulled it free. The weight of it settled over her shoulders like an old memory. Delta Team reassembles. When Maya stepped onto the briefing deck, the low hum of voices quieted. For soldiers stood around the table, their faces lit by the glow of satellite maps spread across a digital display. Some were old teammates, others replacements she hadn't yet met, but all eyes turned to her the second she walked in. Sergeant Cole Harris, her second in command, broke the silence first. "Ma'am," he said, giving a quick nod. "Didn't think we'd see you suit up again." Maya managed a thin smile. "Neither did I." Cole's gaze softened, but there was understanding in his eyes, the kind only someone who'd lost just as much could carry. Colonel Harrington's voice cut through the tension. "All right, listen up. This is a deep recon op, 90 clicks beyond the green zone. Intel suggests hostile presence, but our mission is to extract 2 civilians before they vanish into thin air. Quiet in, quiet out. No mistakes." His gaze settled on Maya. "Brooks, you've led them before. You know the terrain, the patterns, the risks. You take point." For a split second, her breath caught, the weight of the words pressing against the memories she tried so hard to bury. But she nodded, steady and silent. Yes, sir. Gearing up for war. Back in the locker bay, Maya sat on the bench tightening the straps of her body armor. Her hands moved automatically, muscle memory taking over where thought failed. Every click of the buckles, every chambered round, every sharpened edge of the blade felt heavier than it should. Not because of the weight, but because of what it meant. Across from her, Cole leaned against a steel rack, watching her in silence until he finally spoke. "You sure you're ready for this?" Maya didn't look up. "No, but ready or not, they called us. We go." He nodded slowly, then placed a small, battered patch on the bench beside her. It was Elena's. Maya froze, fingers hovering above it. "Found it in storage," Cole said softly. "Thought maybe you'd want to carry her with us." She stared at it, the worn edges, the faded stitching, and something in her chest tightened. Without a word, she picked it up and tucked it into the inner lining of her vest, right over her heart. The helicopter ride. The rotors thundered against the night as the Black Hawk lifted off, cutting through the darkness. The cabin vibrated beneath their boots, the harsh floodlights of the base shrinking into a blur below them. Inside, Delta Team sat silent, faces stoic, hands steady on their rifles. But beneath the silence, the tension was palpable, the unspoken weight of what lay ahead pressing down on them all. Maya sat near the door, eyes fixed on the void outside. Her fingers brushed the edge of her pocket where Elena's photo rested, folded neatly, worn soft from years of being carried and touched. She could feel the weight of her absence, and yet, somehow, her presence too. Cole leaned close over the deafening roar of the rotors. "You're quiet." Maya didn't look at him. Her eyes stayed on the darkness beyond the helicopter. "Just listening," she said. "To what?" She finally turned her head, her voice steady but soft. "The ghosts. On the edge." The helicopter banked hard, descending toward their drop zone, a barren stretch of land swallowed by shadows, where the earth met the unknown. The night was moonless, the air sharp with tension. As the team prepared to fast rope down, Maya's heart pounded in her chest, each beat echoing louder than the rotors themselves. Her mind screamed with memories she didn't want. Elena yelling, the blast, the silence afterward. But she forced them back, anchoring herself in the now. The ramp lowered. The cold air hit like a punch, carrying with it the distant smell of burning oil and wet earth. The world outside was chaos waiting to happen. Maya took a deep breath, steadying herself. Her hand brushed over the vest, feeling the patch beneath her fingertips. Elena's patch, Elena's presence, Elena's promise. "Delta," she said, her voice cutting through the roar. "On me." One by one, they followed her into the dark. Closure. The moment Maya's boots hit the dirt, something inside her shifted. The fear was still there, the doubt, the weight of the past. But so was the clarity. This wasn't about escaping the ghosts. It was about honoring them. The team fanned out, scanning the perimeter, weapons raised and steady. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, sharp and low. The mission had begun. Maya crouched low behind a broken wall, signaling Cole to move left, another soldier right. The radio crackled softly in her ear, but her mind was sharp, her instincts alive. For the first time in 2 years, she wasn't standing in the shadow of that day anymore. She was standing because of it. She whispered under her breath, words only the night could hear. "Still got my 6, Ruiz?" And though no one answered, she felt it. The wind shifted. The silence steadied. The candle inside her, the one she thought had burned out the day Elena died, flickered back to life. Somewhere deep inside, Maya knew, no matter what waited in the dark, she wasn't walking into it alone.